panel will be comprehensive. I'd like to call on stage our editor international, Sridharan, who's really the architect of the Global Summit here for News9. And now if I could introduce our panelists. Before you get on stage, I will introduce you in your Hamdan Al-Shamsi, founder, Hamdan Al-Shamsi Lawyers and Legal Consultants. Siddharth Balachandran, Honorable Chairman, IBPAC. Trevor McFarlane, founder and CEO, EMIR, Emerging Markets Intelligence and Research. And Ameya Prabhu, former President, Indian Chamber of Commerce. This will be a comprehensive panel where Sridharan will be discussing with them fintech to energy security, from AI innovation to policy and ease of doing business, what binds India and UAE. Of course, it's no longer just oil trade, but ideas where we're looking at a better future.
Thank you for that, Nabila. It's a lovely morning, and three important voices that we heard. And the message that's come very unequivocally from all three of them is that the India-UAE relationship is deepening at a frenetic pace. But I think what will be key, after the governments have done their work in terms of creating a framework, an agreement, a CEPA, is for the animal spirits to come into play, which is where our industry, our wonderful companies on both sides of the border that need to come together. So Trevor, I'm going to start with you, because if you look at the global scenario right now, what's happening is that a world order that has existed pretty much for the last 80 years, I would say, is getting upended. And the India-UAE relationship needs to be seen in the perspective of the changes that are happening. So tell us, as someone who watches the market here and market in India and globally, what are the implications for the India-UAE relations as the world order is changing and there are new equations being drawn within different countries? There's a tariff war happening on one front, geopolitical wars taking place right close to where we are today. So how does this impact the India-UAE relations?
Sure, thank you, Shri. So first of all, good morning, everybody. So I've received a warmer welcome walking into a graveyard. Will we try that again and see if we can get everybody off their phones? Good morning, everybody. First of all, congratulations to News9 for bringing us all together for what will be a fantastic conversation. So maybe I'll ask everybody in the audience a question, reflecting the question that Shri asked me. So by a show of hands, who just feels since the start of the year, most likely January, that we've entered into a new geopolitical chapter in the world, in the history of our species? Who feels that? By a show of hands. Okay, the vast majority of people in the room. So let's try to define what that is, okay? So the way I'm looking at this is we've entered into a new chapter which can be defined as predatory multipolarity, okay? Speaking to Shri's question, this hasn't happened overnight, okay? So very quick journey throughout history to define where we are and what it means for India-UAE. So we have the end of the World War II, okay? The US drops the nuclear bombs on Japan. Why did they do that? Many historians would say that Japan was in retreat. And they do that to save the lives of American soldiers, but also to send a message to the Soviets, and that message is, do not mess with us. We have this jaw-dropping, destructive power. At the same time, as Peter Zeihan, a great geopolitical strategist, puts it, they paid the biggest bribe in history. It wasn't Sepp Blatter and FIFA. No, this was the Marshall Plan. So the US pays the Europeans the Marshall Plan. In return, they're sending a message to Europe: do not follow the merry path of the Soviets down to communism. And they see their future demand markets in Europe as well, so they redevelop Europe. So what you have then is you have this unipolar moment, I would argue, for maybe only 3 or 4 decades in the true sense of unipolarity. There's a great thinker by the name of Emanuel Wallerstein who defines a superpower. And if I were to ask any of you to define a superpower, most likely what you would define as a strong military. But a superpower is a country that can tell another country or multiple countries at the same time exactly what to do, and those countries will do what they're told 99.9% of the time. The United States had that for quite a few decades. And then you see the emergence of Europe and the EU, and they start to share some of the benefits with their so-called allies. And then you fast forward to really when things start to get interesting and bring us up to today. You have Obama comes to power. He tries to disengage from the Middle East. He lets the Iranians rise to act as a counterweight against the Saudis in terms of geopolitical power, so he can pivot to the east where he sees threats, i.e. what is happening with China. Then you have Trump 1. We have America first, big tectonic shift. You have Biden, which is essentially the same president in many ways as Trump, particularly with regards on China and the reindustrialization of the United States. Then something critical happens, and that is Putin marches over the borders of another sovereign nation. All of us said that this could never happen in Europe again, and of course it took place. President Trump sees this, and he comes to power in his second term, and he recognizes that we are in this unstable, multipolar period. And you see that with the votes in the UN. Which brings us up to January of this year. And then you have a geopolitical, geoeconomic, technological, environmental, even from a sociological perspective, you have a volcano erupt, which is Donald Trump. And this completely changes the chapter where we're in now at the moment. And you have this emphasis on the rule of law is, in terms of international law, is not at the forefront of the conversation. It's more about if you have the might, you're right. Mm-hmm. It's more about law of the jungle. It is prison rules of international relations. It is the ultimate interpretation of the realist school of international relations. And you have what we've seen unfold over the last 6 months or so. Against that backdrop, you have two countries, India and the UAE, that there is a remarkable opportunity as a result of this. You have two countries with very strong relations, as our colleagues from the diplomatic service had described earlier on, where there's opportunities to work together in a world where there is disruption, but broadly speaking, India's international policy, broadly speaking, is aligned with the United States, and the direction of travel of the global economy will be advantageous to India. And you have a country like the UAE, which is admirably nimble, would be putting it, would be an understatement.
Great thoughts, Mac. We will discuss, Trevor will discuss more about that. Let me just go to the other panelists as well. Mr. Balachandran, you've been an investor. You have made some really significant investments in India. Volatility, uncertainty is now possibly going to be a part of every business house's lexicon. Leaders have to be prepared for it. How do you see the India-UAE opportunity playing out in the context of this uncertainty? We talked about this huge opportunity. There's a deepening that's happening. What do you think we can do further to deepen this relationship, especially in non-oil areas, which are the newer sectors? What specifically do you think we can do?
Thank you, Sridharan. Good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to start off a morning like this. Thank you for the opportunity. So, let me try to give you an opposite spin to that. I think something I believe in very intensely is something called the sphere of influence. And earlier, many years back, the concept was that if you associate yourself with a large sphere of influence, it risks dilution. That was the concept many years back. I believe the opposite to be true at this point in time. Specifically for the last 2 to 3 decades, if I may add. I think when you associate yourself with your state in India, or your district in India, you have a certain bit of gains. You extend that to the state, the gains are more because you represent a larger mass. There is no gain that is larger than associating yourself with a country.
True.
Now, the India-UAE context is such that it was a friendship which has now become an intimate brotherhood. A beautiful coalescence of ideologies, complements each other. Each entity, each institution, each nation has its specific strength. So, as he was just mentioning, I think this seamless integration is probably a first in the world. And from the shift of bilateral, I think this becomes a foundation for the increasingly multilateral concepts that will make this world run. So volatility, I think, the larger the sphere of influence, the lesser you should worry about them.
Okay. Hamdan, after the signing of CEPA, we have also signed a couple of other important agreements, which is on the taxation, reducing the friction of doing business. How do you see the impact of those? The Council General spoke about how the trade has doubled. Do you see this accelerating investments in newer areas, for example, like fintech, AI, or even, let's say, using UAE as a springboard for Indian companies, even startups that want to cater to the rest of the world?
Yeah, so thank you, and good morning to everyone. So I see the momentum increasing exponentially. It started off with a lot of agreements previously, but CEPA was a big agreement signed between the UAE and India. And I think that was a result of there being trust and great leadership that was present, that we benefit from, both people in UAE and India, and we're fortunate to have. The trust has moved to reliability. Now India has started seeing UAE as a reliable partner, and the UAE has started seeing India as a reliable partner. That's extremely important for countries. After reliability, obviously, there's dependency.
Right.
And once dependency comes...
Stability, businesses need stability.
Once dependency comes, there's a marriage being formed, which is very difficult to break. So I see that increasing exponentially. There are more agreements coming out. The leaders of the two nations realize the importance of the relationship between the UAE, realize the significance it will have to both countries. And I want to add that there are now new agreements obviously signed. In 2024, the bilateral investment agreement has been signed, has fostered investments in both countries. As we can see, there are a lot of companies, both semi-government, even governments now are dealing with each other. That's extremely important for the market. Those agreements have a lot of protections. So that trust is now being put down on paper, which provides extreme high investor confidence, and that the UAE and India relationships will continue to grow exponentially.
That's right. Nothing like some good paperwork when it comes to business, I guess. So, Ameya, from your perspective, you're a very interesting perch. You operate out of Dubai. You also have a very deep connection, and you have business in India as well. How are you looking at the place, especially with Indian startups? I mean, we are not too far from DIFC and the media city. How do you see the traction building up in the startup space? We have AI companies coming in. There are fintech companies coming in. Healthcare companies coming in. So talk a little bit about how do you see the traction building up in this space in terms of Indian talent making a base in Dubai and also the capital here backing Indian startups.
Thank you, Shri, and thank you, TV9, for having me on this panel. I think in the morning, our ambassador, Honorable Sanjay Sudhirji, and Honorable Consul General Sivanji really spoke very strongly about the India-UAE relationship. And thanks to the two of them, their predecessors, and of course, led by our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, and the President of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed ji. I think thanks to the leadership of our countries, I think today, I mean, we all talk about the special relationship, but the fact that it's such a seamless relationship that I often joke about that Dubai is the best city in India, is what I always tell people. But I think, you know, I'm someone, for me, Dubai is a second home. I have a home here and I have an office here, so we operate out of both. And often people ask me the question that you did, and I tell them that while a lot of people come to Dubai, a lot of people also use Emirates or Abu Dhabi or Etihad or Air Arabia now as a transit hub to go on to other places.
That's right.
Similarly, a lot of foreigners, be it from South America, be it from the US, be it from Europe, they again use the UAE as a transit hub into India. Even if you look at it from a business point of view, Indians who want to go abroad, including myself, when you want to do global business, the first place you land is UAE, and then from the UAE you go to other areas.
That's right.
And similarly, increasingly so, thanks to SEPA, thanks to the investment agreement, and all the great work that the two governments are doing, you are actually seeing the reverse happening as well. That I was with the Prime Minister in Cyprus earlier this week on his delegation, and they were talking about how much FDI is coming from Cyprus to India. But if you see incremental FDI in the last few years, be it in startups, be it in AI, be it even in sectors which on the regulation front we are catching up, like crypto, you are seeing that come from UAE to India. So while jurisdictions like Cyprus, Singapore, etc. were important jurisdictions in the past, I think now you are seeing UAE becoming one of the primary destinations. And again, if you look around this country has been built by our countrymen. You go to any construction site, you go to any company, you will see that the heart and soul of that company is actually Indians. It's actually us. And hence we feel very comfortable here. I mean, Malayalis love the Malayali food here. Even us Maharashtrians, we don't get as much, but I must say that this is something which is very, very critical. And hence, as Hamdan very rightly said, when there is peace of mind, when my father was minister, he used to always say, there is ease of doing business, but there's also please of doing business. So I think there is a lot of please of doing business here. And I think just to add to close up your point, I think startups, see, UAE is a good market, but UAE is a small market. But it's also high, India is a competitive market, whereas UAE is a high margin market. You can actually make very good margins here.
Right.
So even for Indian startups, we are increasingly seeing Indian startups coming here, using it as a base, going to other countries. Urban Company does well here. They are expanding. Several other Indian companies are expanding. AI is going to be because one of the first countries to have a ministry for AI was the UAE. Omar Al-Olama read that. And I think at that time I was thinking, wow, this is really futuristic. And today you see AI everywhere, So I think that's something which we are very bullish on. So I really think that the partnership between our two great countries of India and UAE is really, as our Prime Minister says, Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Trevor, we are in the middle of this new decade, 5 years gone. What do you think is going to unfold over the next 5 years, especially in the context of two wars that are happening? And there's also disruption happening in terms of AI, how AI is going to impact just about everything that we do as an economy. For the audience here, can you give us 4 or 5 big trends that are going to really shape the next 5 years or maybe even the decade ahead?
Sure, yeah, I think it's a great question. Let's look at it over a longer term view, right? Kind of over the course of this century, what is going to shape all of our lives? I think clearly, as you say, the race for knowledge supremacy, so AI will be one. Decarbonization and climate change will be the other. Zones of disorder as a result of that. I think there will be parts of the world that will experience great instability as a result of arguably the overarching interconnectedness of those two trends. And then clearly demographics, right? Auguste Comte, the great French philosopher and sociologist, with his phrase, demographics is destiny. There is an element of that is most certainly true. And when you look at that, even just take that one piece, and you see that, between now and the end of 2030, we're going to add another 1 billion people onto the global population. By 2050, another billion. You think about, it took our species to get to 1 billion to the year, I think it was 1800. And now we're adding these on into, there's an acceleration. And within that, you ask yourself, okay, well, where is this dramatic shift going to happen around the world? And you're looking at 90% of all that growth happening in Asia and Africa, and 50%, think about this, think about the disruption that this is going to create. 50% of all of that demographic growth will happen in about 8 countries. So you've got India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And you tie into that the progress we are making in climate change, which is very little, and you tie into that the countries that are going to be impacted by climate change and are already being impacted by climate change, and you will have mass migration based on whether it is a fast onset change in weather cycles or slow onset. So if it's fast, people are going to move into cities. If it's slow, they're going to move over borders. Where are they going to go? They're going to go north. They're going to go into Europe. And what does Europe do historically? It votes right. So you start to tie these trends together, and what you see is over the course of this century and the period we're in right now is the most exciting, creative time to be alive in terms of access to opportunity for vast swathes of the population. But vast swathes of the population are being left behind. And that is only going to be exacerbated by these 4 different trends. So that's something that policymakers really need to get their arms around. And that's why I think this partnership between India and UAE can help serve so many goals. We spoke about earlier on in terms of people, profit, and the planet. And that's what we can tie together in this.
Yeah. Mr. Balachandran, coming to you, in India, we always talk about this demographic dividend, that half our population is below 25 years of age. But in an industry or at an age where AI is going to become possibly like electricity, it's going to be in everything. And if you're not AI savvy, you probably will not have a job. I mean, that's at least what the experts are saying. We have a panel later today on AI specifically. But what are your thoughts on how can India leverage its vast pool of talent? We have a lot of youngsters. Skilling is a huge issue. As IBPC, as an industry leader, what do you think people like you could do to help with skilling of these people so that India is able to keep its supply of global talent, not just as construction workers and like others here, but also for Silicon Valley and everywhere else? So what specifically would you want to do?
I think that concept is changing. I think it is very palpably evident that India is slated to be the growth engine of the world, if not already. I truly believe that it is this part of the world that is preventing the world going into recession. Having said that, there are challenges which we have identified, and I'd like to believe that we are addressing them. One of them is the concept of artificial intelligence becoming, as you said, as electricity, as an integrator. I think it'll cease to become a specific industry. It'll be so seamlessly incorporated into every line of business that
absolutely
it is a must. It will become a must. And I think therein lies India's advantage. Already, we have identified AI as a potential integrator. So we have already taken steps to that. Now, the role of community organizations like the IBPC, which I think is an extension of your earlier question, which I missed answering. What can we do? I think forums like these, many more are needed. Media is that bridge, that facilitator for the message to be spread across. That India knows of its strengths. India is aware of its weaknesses. Now, the key here is to create a narrative, a credible narrative, in enhancing and conveying one's strengths and trying to negate one's weaknesses in not so public a manner. I think that is the thin line of communication that platforms like these and community organizations like the IBPC can help facilitate. But suffice it to say that I think the future is very clear, and the future is India and the surrounding nations.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Hamdan, it's very interesting that some of the sovereign funds here already own shares in so many listed companies in India. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority alone owns more than 20 listed companies in India. They have shares in them. But a whole range of startups are also getting funded. So India obviously is a huge market. From UAE's perspective, how critical a role is it going to play as UAE creates its own future in terms of envisioning its own future as a significant player in this region, despite the small Emirati population that is like native? How do you think India is going to integrate with your own growth story going forward?
Yeah, so I think a big country like India, a big economy, requires financial centers. It's a must. And Dubai acts as one important financial center for a lot of Indian businesses, businessmen, and semi-government, obviously, corporations. And I think the legal language between the two countries is being meshed very quickly. A lot of legal firms in India have set up in the UAE, have connected with UAE lawyers, and I think the language spoken is very similar nowadays. I certainly see that there's harmony. I've noticed a big trend of Indian companies investing as well in the UAE, taking stakes in companies. They find it interesting. And as Ameya has rightly said, there are startups that set up in India, but there are reasons as well for you to set up in Dubai. There are differences in margins, say, differences in environment, differences in the people that are here. Certainly to have a jurisdiction for Indian businessmen outside India that is very close to at least the east side of India, that's extremely close, that you can treat as your second home, as some Indian businesses do, is extremely important for the business environment.
Right. So, Ameya, since you watch the VC space so closely, you're an investor yourself, can we expect the next unicorn, Indian unicorn, to be born out of Dubai, for example?
I mean, that would be a misnomer, right? Because a unicorn born out of Dubai would be an Emirati unicorn. But I mean, yeah, I guess unicorns formed by Indians could be born
Founded
here.
by Indians,
And I think, but I also am a firm believer that if the country which you are in, you must always respect that country. So even if you are forming the unicorn in the UAE, it should be and proudly be an Emirati unicorn. And I think that's something very important, because it's something which we really think that's the most important. But I would like to add one more thing because I was listening to the panelists. Last quarter, I'm an economist by training. Last quarter, we grew by 7.4%. So while there is a demographic dividend in many other countries, Nigeria, DRC, Indonesia, but there is no other country which has an economy like we do. We are now the fourth largest economy, we just overtook Japan. This year we should end up at around 4.2 trillion, in line with the PM's vision that in the next 2 years we should hit 5 trillion. But what that means, growing at 7.4% at a 4.2 trillion economy, that means we add about $300 billion currently to the GDP every year. Now that's more than most of the countries that have the demographic dividend as their total GDP. So we add in 1 year more than what people have as the total size of their GDP. So we are adding a DRC, we are adding a Pakistan every year to our GDP, just every year. So that shows you the power of India that is there today. And the eighth wonder of the world is compounding. So at the next level, this will keep growing and growing and growing. We'll soon overtake Germany. And of course, after that, it's a steep climb to China and the US. But I think in the volatile world today, Bharat or India is the one safe harbor that you will find. Our markets are still doing well. Despite the issues last week, markets are going up. So I highly recommend also for a lot of them, please invest in India.
Absolutely. I second that totally. So that brings me to the, the end of the conversation, but I just want to ask Trevor one important question. What's happening around the world is that the age of multilateralism is maybe giving way to what I would call minilateralism. And very interestingly, we have bilateral, trilateral, quadrilateral kind of agreements happening among countries, and they're very comfortable dealing with each country on specific terms. So there is very little conflict in, let's say, for India to buy oil from Russia, but also like maintain a fantastic relationship with US, for example. So is this going to become the norm? Is this the way for countries to do business going forward?
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, obviously there's different dynamics and different geopolitical interactions between specific parties, but broadly speaking, we're seeing regionalization, bilateralism. We're seeing the age of the omni-juggling act, okay? So there's countries that are non-aligned or trying to be non-aligned that are managing this better than others, and they have a geopolitical foundation that allows them to do that. The UAE is a perfect example of this. One of the greatest assets that the UAE has, and it is genuinely an incredible country, is obviously the visionary leadership and all of that, right? But it is how agile and nimble it is in every situation. You know, we hosted a private event probably a year and a half ago, and we had the UAE Minister for Trade with us, and we were asking him this question of how do you position yourself at all times when it seems we're living through this age of accelerated crises, right? How do you manage to position yourself in a way that the UAE always seems to be a beneficiary? And it's the agility. It's the government thinking like a business and having the best interests of its people at heart. And those two things are tricky things to pull off. There's not many countries that can do it.
Right. So one final question before we close this panel. Mr. Balachandran, when you came to Dubai, you were a young man. You've done exceedingly well, so you're a role model.
Enough. Long way
You're
to
still
go.
very young. Yeah. So my question is, if I'm someone sitting in India, I'm let's say 25-year-old, I'm looking at this whole, this huge India opportunity. India is a growing market, tremendous strength as a, let's say, back office of the world, and UAE as a springboard to the rest of the world. What would your advice be to these young entrepreneurs who want to leverage the India-UAE opportunity? How would you suggest that they play this opportunity? If you were to come here today, how would you approach this opportunity?
Good question. So I think the first thing that I would, and it would be preposterous for me to advise, like I said, I have a long way to go. So, but what I would suggest is temper your expectation, but understand your aspiration. I think that is very key. Every initiative requires clarity of purpose. I think, so when you think that you are on your way to creating a unicorn, it is very important for you to understand that a unicorn cannot be a sustained success purely on valuation. It has to be bottom line driven. That is probably the lesson that is ingrained in most Indians. That feeling of rootedness, you can aim for the sky, but you know that you're actually on earth. I think that combination is unparalleled when it comes to impact. And the only place, or if I may say so, the best place to exercise that skill is the UAE.
Fantastic.
So the first step in their journey would be to probably incorporate in India, make the visit, understand what UAE is, treat UAE and India as a coalescence, as a combination, not as separate countries. That is probably the suggestion I would give.
Fantastic advice. So on that note, let me, thank all my panelists, and please join me in giving them a big round of applause for